All right. And we are live, folks. Thanks for tuning in this evening. I'm slightly out of breath because I realized moments before that what I thought was up here was not up here, and I had to run back to the house, and
he just made it.
I just made it in the nick of time. We are upping the ante this evening. If you saw tonight's giveaway, DD700, so that's an e-collar in the spirit of all things e-collar, collar conditioning, when and how to start. We're also going to do a breakdown on what the proper processes are for training and moving into collar conditioning. But we'd like to do some check-ins as we go through here. I know I talked to Miss Kelly, who looks like she's in the house with her check-in already. She has spiced up the bird dog chat bingo.
Ooh.
Spicy. And all of that being said, we want to say thank you to her for taking care of that. It's one less thing on my plate. So, Miss Kelly, you are appreciated. But for those of you that don't know, we use Bingo Baker to make a bingo card. You can get your bingo card by being a patron at any level. You sign up. You can click on your little card, and it's basically our idiosyncrasies. Is that the right word? We talked about this a couple times. The silly things that we do in the evening or mention or what have you. You get to select the little cards for a chance to win something this evening. Again, it is a DD700 for patrons. So if you have questions on how to do that, let us know. But you want to roll through check-ins?
Yeah, we can roll through check-ins. Just like usual, we'll do some check-ins, a couple announcements.
I want to make that slightly larger. Does that work? Is that a little easier to read? It's definitely easier for me.
Well, I'm not going to have to squint at it, but this is better for you. Whatever works for you, babe. And then we will roll into our topic of the night, which is all things e-collar related. And then if you guys have questions, save them to the end, or if they're burning a hole in your pocket, throw them up with a super chat, and we'll get to those first. But that typically happens after we've kind of done our announcements and our topic of discussion. So that being said, we're going to start rolling with check-ins. We got Central Missouri checking in, Ontario, Canada. Woo, woo. We've got our first international check-in right off the bat. Minnesota, Angleton, Texas, Spruce Pine, North Carolina, Stony Creek, New York. Angelo, we'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks. I know you're signed up for our seminar with Bob and Ethan. That'll be fun out here at Standing Stone headquarters.
We've mentioned it a lot, but in case you don't know what we're talking about, the Lone Stone Standing Duck,
Stone Duck. Take
whatever
your pick.
You want to call it. The Ethan and Bob led. Oh, what did we lose? I lost signal. There it is. The Ethan and Bob led weekend of shenanigans. It starts. You were making a switch. I appreciate it. It starts on Friday evening with a get-together, meet and greet. Cinco de Mayo themed evening. And what we'd like to do is have the time to spend meeting you all, and we'll chit-chat dogs and get kind of a feel of what we're going to plan out. We have a lot of potentials with that are geared toward versatile dogs with an emphasis on retrieving, as well as there will be some straight retrievers here as well. We've got some cool stuff set up with technical things that way. That'll be Bob's game, and then I know we have a lot of versatile dogs showing up. So it's kind of how to apply the retrieving mentality or retrieving mindset, to the minds of versatile dogs as well. That's a big, I think there's a big disconnect with that on exactly how to do it, especially looking at it from the versatile dog side of things. So most of the folks in the versatile world have no idea what they're doing, and I say that as Ethan's brutally honest comment because I fall into that category as well until I got to spend a lot more time with a really good retriever trainer and learn how can we spin what you're doing to fit the minds of versatile dogs. So we've been able to add that to the program, and we want to be able to share that with you guys, as well as have a lot of fun. Got some extra kind of games and things to play Saturday evening, and then a kind of morning, wrap things up on Sunday. By noon, everybody's on the road. So
continuing on with some check-ins, we've got Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. We've got New Jersey, Philadelphia, Norwich, Kansas. Woo woo, Kansas in the house. Eagle River, Alaska.
First international check-in. I'm teasing.
We had one. Another check-in from Alaska.
Basically another country.
Mission, Kansas. Parachute, Colorado. Pretty Prairie. 2 weeks in a row. Annie? I don't know what we're going to do with you.
Setting a record.
Tampa, Florida. Minnesota. See you in a few days. We got Mark. And yes, you will see us in a few days for Puppy Send Home. We've got Warwick, New York. Hey, Mark. Hopefully you and Sarah are doing good. Bars, Ontario. There's another international check-in.
Scott Clark in the house.
Atlanta. We've got Cincinnati. We've got South Carolina, Northern Michigan, Eagle River, Alaska. Pennsylvania says hi. Wisconsin. Stone Cold Standing Strong Seminar. Well, that could be interesting.
Depending on the margaritas.
Uh-huh. Yes,
maybe falling strong.
Maybe a rough Saturday morning. Let's go with that.
Lone Stone Standing Duck, Springfield, Illinois. Hey, Robert. We've got Eagle River, Alaska here. Is there like a whole clan from Alaska here tonight? That's crazy.
It's a small batch, Robert. It's not the barrel proof. I don't have a barrel proof anymore.
Grand Island, Nebraska, Austin, Texas, Syracuse, New York, Indianapolis, Massachusetts, Atlanta, Georgia here. Perfect. Awesome questions starting already. So we'll be getting through those, like I said, once we talk about our topic of choice. Which, speaking of our topic tonight, we reached out on Instagram and therefore also through Facebook, but for suggestions for topics, because week after week, like Ethan and I's brains kind of like turn into pudding or something. And it's
I don't know if it's week after week, Ethan and ours brains turn into pudding. It's like Ethan's pudding is always there, and Kat's brain kind of like gets near the pudding, which slows her down just enough that...
Basically, what we're trying to say is, like, sometimes it's like, what should we talk about? What do people even want to learn about? I feel like we've talked about things in podcasts and in our YouTube channel and articles and things that we do. So sometimes I'm like, well, we've already talked about that. But that's what evergreen content is, supposedly, is stuff that just keeps getting talked about. Well, and it's always relevant. There we go.
It's a very valid subject, right? I mean, this is a huge portion of what's defining what a young dog will be. The way that we recommend that you train dogs. I mean, that's it. There are multiple facets, and there's a couple of pieces of different ways that we can kind of spin this conversation. It says e-collars, when to start, how to start, whatever. But why e-collars in our venue and how to prepare for that, the e-collar portion itself, how to use them, and then hit that like button. All right, so but before we get with that, the last thing that I want to put into this is we do have our spring sale going on right now. If you haven't already seen, that is standingstonesupply.com. So I try and mention it without over-mentioning it. We're not huge on self-promotion stuff because I don't want to sound like one giant advertisement, but the number one critique that we get from folks is you don't do enough self-promotion. So here's a plug. Spring sale coming at you.
And it's crazy how many people we talk to or have videos out there, and they're like, well, where did you get such and such a training product? Or where do you have whatever? And we're like, from our Standing Stone supply store, our own online store. And they're like, what? You have an online supply store? And we're like, yes. So it's something that we overlook mentioning, but we probably shouldn't.
Spring sale is the code, 15% site-wide, so that's even bird launchers, DT gear, all of the Standing Stone supply specifics.
Easy leads, treats, med bags, waterers, Caranda beds, climbs, and our online course.
Yeah, baby. You get you a deal on a quality pair. So what those are, the pairs are all racing grade pigeons. They're a great interjection into whatever birds you have. If you're wanting to fly more than about 500 yards, you should get into something with some homing instincts behind it. Barn pigeons can do 500 yards though. So let's
500 yards.
I mean, line of sight. If you can't see it, they can't make it home. The let's see here. So getting into this, I think that a brief discussion on this is important. There's a big division in the dog training world of people that use e-collars and people that don't. There's all kinds of different words that can be used to describe both sides. We're not going to get into that aspect of things, but
no name calling here.
No name calling here. But the big thing that I would say is there are specific dogs and even more specifically, specific breeds that I really feel like a good portion of the training could be done, if not all the training, could be done without the use of an e-collar if you put enough time, effort,
and conditioning,
consistency. But still, for me, it can be really a peace of mind type of thing, even in that situation. But what we're working with, and the majority of people that are watching here are going to have some form of hunting dog, and specifically even more, typically some form of versatile hunting dog, okay? So if you break down the individual categories, I would say collie / herding dog zone would be the first one that I would venture into that would not require a lot of e-collar or any e-collar use. They are very in tune. They are very dependent. They are very cooperative. They're also very intelligent. So if you're putting in the time, they're going to give you back everything that you're giving them.
Bred to be less independent than
Correct.
some of our hunting and sporting breeds, like Shorthairs specifically. But even labs, when you're working with these dogs at a distance, a lot of times you need to be able to reach out and communicate with them.
100%. So when you work into the actual sporting, and I don't say actual sporting dogs, these are all different working breeds, okay? But sporting dogs, being dogs bred and designed for hunting, they have a category that's, I know this applies in all working breeds, okay? You've got cow drive and you've got other things, but it is a very much a closer and quarter working, work together process and a different mindset in a dog. But you get into retrievers and flushers, okay? They are a more dependent dog. They're designed to do things close in quarters, and when they do get out there, they are more in tune with looking to you for direction. Not always. This is a generalization over the breeds themselves. But then you cross that bridge into, we'll stay on this for a second. When I worked with, if you saw our retriever series with Sprig and with Clutch, the e-collar portion was not as needed the way that it is with our young short hair puppies. And the big difference with that, I believe, is when you come into the versatile dog category, when you are looking at short hairs or other versatile breeds, they are bred to be independent creatures. We also apply them being cooperative, and we want to work together as a team. But if they're doing it right here, they're not doing their job. They're supposed to go out there, independently hunt, search a field, work with us, but not next to us. So when you apply those things, having the use of an e-collar is very beneficial.
Okay.
That's it. That's my box. I've stepped off of it.
Okay.
The next piece that we move into, though, is talking about the training process itself.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important, is that we talk about this a lot, laying the foundation. You can't just jump right into collar conditioning without any of the prep work. And people ask us all the time, well, how old should my dog be before I start collar conditioning? And again, we don't necessarily put an age on it, because if you haven't done the groundwork, and I say 16 weeks old is when we recommend starting collar conditioning for behaviors, but your puppy hasn't done anything previously, then no, 16 weeks isn't the answer. We also get dogs in for training at the kennel here all the time. They have to be a minimum of 6 months old. And some of those dogs come in without any collar conditioning and can be even considered, quote unquote, a blank slate from most formal obedience or any training. So it's not about an age. It's about those prerequisites, which we talk about all the time. Oh, yeah, my G&T. It's my
gin and tonic, baby.
My go-tos. But we always start by talking about collar conditioning as first you have to teach the behavior that you want your puppy to be conditioned to through positive reinforcement-based training. We utilize clickers, and a lot of times that positive reward is going to be food-based. We work on building food drive and work ethic with our puppies from the get-go, starting at 8 weeks. If you, like we've mentioned, that online course, it literally blocks out step-by-step, lesson by lesson, how we train and work with all of our puppies, starting first with charging the clicker training, and then what we talk about is generalizing and differentiating those behaviors, and then being able to move into collar conditioning. So we start clicker training and teaching a behavior and associating that with a cue. Then we can generalize that behavior. And what that means...
Yeah, this is not to distract you, sorry.
You're a giant distraction, always. Anyway, so what I wanted to mention is generalizing those behaviors is huge. So when you're working with your puppy on sit, for example, and I've got a great example for this, and that's why I mention it, because I want to talk about it. Sit is a really easy one to teach your puppy, something that we teach all of our puppies, and it's really easy to do. Well, if you do all of your training sessions in your kitchen or your living room or your garage or your backyard, but you don't generalize that behavior in different situations, like, hey, we can not only sit for our food rewards, but we could sit for going out the door, or we could sit for coming in the door, or we could sit before a retrieve. We can utilize that in lots of different situations. And it's so important to generalize that, because even though a dog is like, you tell them sit in the kitchen and they immediately sit, like they know this, like you've taught them. Then you go somewhere else, like, for example, Hex, when we were down at the pond recently doing his water introduction video, which will be coming out soon. I was just trying to get him to sit and focus and sit still so I could do my intro, because nothing is more distracting than Ethan or a dog jumping around, hopping around, pulling on you while you're trying to talk to a camera. Those are the two most distracting things in the world. So I was like, if I can just get Hex to sit while I talk to the camera and explain what this video is going to be about, that'd be perfect. Well, I asked him to sit, and he looked at me like a deer in the headlights. Like, he's like, sit? I have never heard that word before in my life. I really don't know what you're asking me to do right now, Mom. Well, that is just a great example of how generalizing a behavior, even though we've done a ton of generalizing of the sit behavior with Hex, he still was like, this is a new environment, and I don't think I can do it here. So we had to work through that, and that's important to be able to recognize. But anyway, so I kind of digressed on generalizing. But we also work on teaching multiple behaviors through positive reinforcement. So sit, recall, place training. And so we also need to make sure that our puppies can differentiate between those cues, because if they can only sit for everything we ask them, that means they don't truly understand. And what we're trying to do is develop a behavior and develop an understanding of that behavior or response to that cue. And we do that so that the dogs can be conditioned to that, as well as build engagement with us, enjoy the training sessions instead of just, oh, well, they kind of get it, let's just slap a collar on them and push and push and push them to do it.
Write this down, folks. Okay? So you have teach, differentiate, generalize, and proof. To gift. I'm all about acronyms. And that one is horrible. But the beginning, like Kat mentioned, teach, then differentiate, meaning work multiple different behaviors so that you can differentiate between sit, here, heel, whoa, kennel, all of those things. Then generalize, moving the session around, exactly the example, right? Down by the pond, we need to probably generalize a little bit more just so that you have an understanding. And then the last portion, which is what really this evening is about, is proofing. And that's where the e-collar portion comes in. Now, I want to let everybody know, because this is one of the most commonly asked questions that I get, or common misconceptions or whatever. It's in the session itself, when we're utilizing positive reinforcement, the dog does everything perfect, right? Comes, sits, kennels, all of it perfect. But what they don't do is anything at all outside of the immediate training session. Okay, so this goes into
That's very normal.
100% normal. It goes into how dogs' brains work. Okay, dogs are place and situationally oriented. Lots of big things I'm throwing at you that you need to write down and then just hit yourself in the head with them when you're frustrated with your dog going, why don't you listen? Well, it's because that's how they're hardwired. It's just part of it. Okay, so you need to understand they're place and situationally oriented, which means that in the specific area, during the specific situation or the training session, we're focused and we understand that. So there's different ways that you can work around that, which would be spreading a meal out or utilizing some other treats, which is fine. If your dog isn't picky about eating, you can incorporate other treats throughout the day. And that's going to help you to bridge those gaps between training sessions, as well as, again, generalize the idea that training can happen anytime, anywhere. And that will head you
in different environments, like down at the pond.
Yes, but that helps you to move in the direction of a true understanding. And why do we need a true understanding, Kat?
So they can sit at the pond?
Sure. Yep, that would be a great example.
But they need to have a true understanding so that when we get to collar conditioning, they're not confused.
Correct, because this is one thing that we do not do. We do not teach with an e-collar. It's not what it is there for. And I think that again, super common misconception. I'm going to grab the collar and this is going to get my dog to do something. And that's not the case. If the dog can't already do it, we can't apply the e-collar to that training session. It's just not the right way to do it. Now, you may get some results. I mean, even to the extent of people saying, my dog doesn't come back to me. And I'm going to say this because the person that last said this to me said it exactly like this, okay? My dog don't come back to me, so I got me an e-collar and I shocked them and they come back to me. So this magic wand is amazing.
Well, basically your dog was scared and apprehensive and didn't know what to do. And so its default behavior was come back to mom and dad because that's a safe place to be.
And it's about a flip of a coin there. It could have been
run
away, scared for its life, or run towards you, scared for its life, and then you think magically you've made something happen when in fact you've essentially set yourself up for failure down the road of being able to use the e-collar for anything else. The next thing that we hear that's like cringe-worthy, okay, is I don't even have to charge the collar. I just put it on my dog and they listen, okay? So granted, dogs are pretty smart. They are going to figure out collar smartness because, yes, the only way that you could prevent 100% collar smartness or you could 100% prevent collar smartness from becoming a thing is if you are 100% consistent, which is unrealistic. We can try really hard, but we're all going to fall short of 100% consistent in all aspects of life.
Even us, even professional dog trainers. Especially us. Especially
us. There you go. I was trying to say especially, and you said it for me.
There's no X in it.
There's no X in it. No. So, all of that being said, go ahead. It's just moving into how we utilize the collar.
Yeah. So we don't teach with the e-collar. We reinforce and continue conditioning behaviors. I did want to mention one of the other things people say a lot is, well, my dog, especially when they've got a young puppy, 8, 9, 10-week-old puppy, they're like, they listen all the time. They're perfect. All they do is sit. Well, when I ask them to, right? Or they come back every time, even outside. Well, what's going to happen is eventually your puppy is going to get to the point where they're bold, confident, they want to explore, they're curious about their environment, and there's enough distractions that it that treat, that reward that you're using for positive reinforcement training isn't enough to pull their attention anymore, and they're easily able to ignore you at that point. And they're like, meh, I'd rather go do what I want to do and explore what I want to explore than listen for this food reward or this retrieve or this, attention, whatever your positive reinforcement is. And that's why being able to move to collar conditioning to reinforce that behavior and proof that behavior in those higher distracting environments is going to be really important.
So you could say, well, this can be done without an e-collar. And it absolutely can be. And specifically with certain personalities, it could be done even better. You say, well, my dog doesn't need that. They're very cooperative. They listen all the time. There are dogs that would be that way. You're going to have windows where you start to give a little more leeway in things, and they, take that inch a mile. With any dog and any personality, it's going to happen at some point in time. Now, for me, maybe it's my personality from a controlling standpoint, or just an efficiency and effectiveness standpoint. I'm a huge fan of technology in general. Like, we utilize all of the advancements that are possible, including was super stoked about getting a car that would help drive itself. All things technology that are an advancement category, we try and utilize in our lives. So it's not that the training, it's not about we have to get this done faster, but it's we can get this done more efficiently for both us and the dog with the least amount of pressure and the least amount of mistakes and potential for big things to go wrong from happening. And big things to go wrong would be hunting, training near something like a road where is literally one everywhere when you go training, pretty much. Even if it's just a country road, that's that time that the one farmer drives by and he's not paying attention. Okay, so things can go bad, and if we have stuff set up by using an e-collar, this is essentially a long leash. Okay, it gives us the ability to talk to our dogs via a long leash, and that's the way that we want you to think about it, and that's the way that we want you to utilize it in the majority of the time that you're using the collar. There are times where correction and higher levels of correction will be necessary, but for the most part, think about utilizing an e-collar as a way to communicate with your dog.
Yes. As well as I like the idea of thinking of the e-collar as, an extension of your leash. And to give yourself a little more control, and a safety seatbelt, whatever you want to think about it. Because you can't run as fast as your dog, and you can't catch up to them at a distance. And it is definitely a scary situation watching your dog run towards a dangerous situation and not having control over that. I have an exact situation where this happened. I had a couple dogs out in the yard going potty. Just, hey, we're hanging out, going potty, no e-collars on them, no big deal. We're just, we're a half mile off the road.
Yeah, exactly. Yep,
we're pretty safe and secluded. Well, I saw one of our employees getting ready to head down our driveway to leave for work. Normal. So I called one of the dogs, because I had the rest put up by then. One of the dogs that still hadn't pooped yet, I heeled her so that she was in a heel, because I'm like, okay, I'll have control over her until, Tessa, which was the employee leaving, got down the driveway, and then I'd release Trix, the dog that I'm talking about, so that she could go potty, get her business done, and then put her away. Well, Tessa was half to 3/4 of the way down the driveway by then. I figured that was plenty of distance for me to release Trix so that she could get her business done. So I released Trix, and she started milling around, and then she saw the movement of the car and bolted towards it. I don't have an e-collar on my dog. How do I get her stopped? How do I get a hold of Tessa to be like, stop, 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 don't run over my dog? And this is all happening so quickly, guys. I'm like, I don't have an e-collar. Okay, next, I'm fumbling for my phone because luckily I have Tessa's phone number. You're not going to have everybody's phone number who's just randomly driving down the road. And I'm trying to get her number up, call her fast enough to be like, hey, stop, slow down. Trix is headed your way. I didn't get her called in time, guys. But thankfully, Tessa was paying attention, driving slowly down the driveway, and she saw Trix run out in front of her, and she stopped. I was able to go down the road, pick up Trix, and bring her back.
Now, granted, that all happened without the use of an e-collar, right? But there was that moment. That's what I'm saying. There was that moment that could have been prevented by having it. So there's definitely, it's and here the last push towards why we use e-collars, which is just you have insurance for the in case something happens, not the I have insurance because I know nothing will. So we like to utilize our e-collar as a insurance policy and the ability to know that we can handle our dogs if we need to, as well as it gives us the ability to communicate, okay? Communication in the sense of, this was explained to me one time this way, and it makes sense, okay? If you've ever been to a concert, all right? So imagine you're in the car, you're driving to the concert, we're having a conversation just like this, talking about how cool it's going to be to listen to Zach Bryan sing a song. Can't think of one off the top of my head because I suck at that. Something in the orange. Burn, burn, burn. All right. So we're talking about this.
So glad we're going to his concert in August.
Well, I volunteered to bring breakfast. Okay. So we're talking though about how cool it's going to be at this volume. We can hear each other fine. We get to the concert, it's loud. Everybody's hooping, hollering, they're excited. The music's turned up as loud as it can possibly go. If we stay at this level, we can't hear each other anymore, standing right next to each other. So we have to talk louder, basically yell at each other, right? We're excited, we're talking, we can hear each other now at this yelling. Now, if we take that same volume back to the car after the concert, it's going to be like, why are you yelling at me? I'm sitting right next to you. That's the same with utilizing e-collar from a form of communication. We're going to have different levels that we need to communicate based off of the level of distraction that is in that situation.
Noise, distraction.
Around the house, pretty low. Backyard, maybe a little bit more. Hunting a field, chasing a bird or a deer or a something, even more. Higher levels of distraction, higher levels. So now let's get into specifically how do we start that collar conditioning process, basically. And I think we've covered basically when your dog is ready.
Yep.
They understand, they've taught. Now we need to move into how to actually utilize the collar. So we're not teaching with the collar. What are we doing with the collar? We're going to essentially, it's going to become a cue or a focus redirector, right? That's kind of how it's applied. It's there with the cue in the beginning, but we use two main forms of the operant conditioning spectrum here: negative reinforcement and positive punishment. And this will answer the question that you probably are already asking is, do I have to use the e-collar forever? Okay, we're going to get to that. Negative reinforcement category. The timing on this is, the division of this timing is, Kat and I had a discussion about this. The division of this timing is very important. You have collar turns on before you ask the cue. That's negative reinforcement. Now, this is only a split second, okay? But it's the collar turns on before you ask the cue, or the collar turns on after you've asked the cue. Okay,
and
that's the difference. That's positive punishment. Sounds like an oxymoron to say positive punishment in a sentence there, but that is the scientific term for it. Okay?
Because we're talking about an equation of adding or subtracting, not
Correct.
Good or bad.
Now, you may be thinking, well, you turned on the collar, that's adding, right? No. In a sense it is, but it's because it comes before that in the mind it works this way, from a sense of you are not part of the equation until you start talking. So this random annoyance comes, that's the e-collar. Think of it like an alarm clock. You're sleeping, the alarm clock turns on, you wake up, shut the alarm clock off. That is negative reinforcement. It goes away once you comply to build a better behavior, strengthen the behavior of getting up on time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Can I give you a good example?
Yes, I would love it.
So fetch, retrieving work tends to be more negative reinforcement, right? And then recall tends to be more positive punishment.
In the beginning,
Tends.
yeah, so that's great. It's a great point. So what we want to look at it is when you're teaching, you're using positive reinforcement. When we move into the collar
when you're
work
conditioning,
itself,
let's say when you're conditioning,
Well, when we're
because we don't teach with the collar.
No. When we're teaching, you use positive reinforcement. That's what I'm saying.
Sorry.
Yep. Okay. And then when we move into the e-collar portion, we start all of it. Fetch, recall, place training, all of it is with negative reinforcement. So you turn the collar on, you ask. Once they comply, the collar shuts off, and not until. This is a big mistake that people make, okay? So to break that cycle down again, collar turns on, you ask for something, they do it, the collar shuts off, and that strengthens the behavior of whatever happened in that window. Okay, so you need to be prepared for that. You need to be set up for that. That can be if it's recall or you need a controlled environment. And Kat likes to say, and we talked about this before, I would warm up the session by doing some positive reinforcement reps first to kind of get in the mood.
Build some momentum.
Right? Building momentum's better than getting in the mood. But you've built momentum, but now as you're using the e-collar, it's very important what happens in that window from the time the collar turns on to the time the collar shuts off. Once you
turn the collar off, whatever you're conditioning and strengthening, that's what's happening. So this happens a lot, and we work with people on Patreon with the collar conditioning process, or the collar conditioning process maybe has gone wrong, and we're trying to help them fix that.
Correct.
What happens a lot of times is people aren't necessarily prepared for their dog's reaction, and they push the button. Their dog doesn't respond exactly like it looks in one of our videos. And then they're like, oh, my dog stopped and froze, or is digging at their collar, or ran and hid under the table. What do? I don't know. I'm kind of lost. So they shut the collar off. And then their dog just learned, okay, so this weird sensation happens on my neck. I feel this vibrating. I hear this buzzing. Kind of freaks me out. And I hide. I avoid.
The handler goes, I don't know what's happening. Shut
the collar shut off. That must be what I'm supposed to do when I feel this weird stuff happening.
Now, the power with reinforcement-based training is it strengthens behaviors exponentially. So the first rep, we grow a lot in an understanding that hiding under the couch is the response to shut the collar off anytime I ever feel that again. If it happens again, we've now strengthened that even more. And a third time, it's going to take a lot to work past that now. Now, the same thing happens. 2 or 3 really good reps that are timed appropriately, that grows us exponentially in the right direction, which is why often our dogs look drastically better than what you may have experienced yourself. And that's because our timing is accurate and we don't have any of the mess up reps in there on average. Now, all of that being said, we've taught. Now we're going to introduce first the negative reinforcement portion, which is how we just explained with anything that they already know, making that as simple as is possible. So if you primarily do sessions and they're really good in the kitchen or living room or your basement or whatever it is, that's where you want to start collar conditioning. We also see on a regular basis people are like, yeah, I normally am inside doing training sessions, but then I go out in the backyard to do my first collar conditioning session. Like, that's not optimal. Let's go back where it is optimal, okay? So now that we have a behavior that's developed with negative reinforcement, they can almost anticipate what you're going to ask depending on the situation. When you push the button, they're looking for what do I do, whether that's recall or place training or fetch or whatever it may be. They know how to shut the collar off, okay? Now we move into the positive punishment category, and this is Charles who was talking about with this. You would say the cue, then you would push the button. And the timing on that's going to be, for the first few reps, it's going to be immediate, like shortly after, but then you're going to work into the category of the dog learns to avoid the collar by complying. So if you say here,
I feel like it gives the dog an opportunity to think.
Correct.
And comply. So you say here, your dog stares at you like, not going to come, and then you press the button. That is positive punishment. Or you say fetch, and the dog doesn't immediately reach for the bumper. Nick, 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 until they've reached for the bumper. Or the dog is on a kennel, a place, a platform, dog bed, and they break off of that dog bed without being released. As soon as they come off that dog bed, the pressure, the collar, is applied until they're back on that bed. So we're adding the collar
as a form of punishment
for doing something wrong, which is not listening, not recalling, getting off their bed when they're not supposed to, not fetching when we've given them the cue. It's applied after that until they do the behavior.
So let's see here. What was your question? It's not too late. Just say it.
I was just going to talk about withholding the cue. Like, I think that's more in the teaching part, but it's something that I think kind of leads to people. I think a lot of dogs are collar wise or collar smart is because of things like that, withholding the cue,
break that down for me. I'm not even 100% sure what you're saying.
So when you're teaching the dog, and instead of saying Fido here, you say, hey, Fido, and you get their attention. They're coming to you. Then you use the cue for your recall. So it's more in the teaching aspect, which is why I said it might be too late.
No, I understand what you're saying. So basically, and correct me if I'm not gathering this, but you're talking about pulling focus to the situation first, right? So withholding, a lot of people wear out cues. Like,
yes.
Here. Well, dogs can only think about one thing at a time. So if they're over here sniffing, they aren't thinking about that. That's what Kat was referring to, in building momentum kind of helps prevent that. And getting the dog's mindset on, we're going to work on this specific behavior. And later we have to work around pulling focus from distractions other ways, or being able to work through those.
And like we've talked about, dogs are very place and situationally oriented. So when you apply the collar pressure, stimulation, let's say stimulation or vibrate, and you've got a bumper on the ground and they're collar conditioned to fetch, that is the understanding, like, oh, I feel the collar, I should fetch that. Or, oh, I feel the collar and there's a dog bed right there, I should get on that dog bed. And the cue does direct them, and if I've got a dog that is collar conditioned to go on a dog bed or recall, and they feel that collar, they may decide before the cue is given, oh, I'm going to head towards the dog bed. And they're like, no, what I wanted was here. So then I introduce that cue then. So
again, collar turns on in the beginning stages, and then your cue can direct them to specific things, okay? In the beginning stages, and this is the question, like, how long does this process before you bridge to the next, right? So how long are we in negative reinforcement until we go to positive punishment category? And that depends on the dog. I would say on average, months to upwards of a year category that we're very consistently using the collar to build really good understandings of things, but it depends on the dog. So some dogs may be super cooperative and picking up on things instantly that you can move into that only pushing the button if they aren't complying category. So now we've covered some of the biggest basics. That's the simple part. Even though it sounded like a big explanation, it's important. That's the simple part.
Clear as mud, right, guys?
Yes.
You guys got it all figured out now.
So now, Kat said this, and this is why I want to draw attention to it. You said Nick. Okay, so there's a difference in forms of collar pressure that we can use. We can use vibrate. We can use continuous stimulation. We can use momentary stimulation, or we can use some kind of combination of the above. And it's important to understand that the combination is very valuable. Feeling comfortable and understanding that also part of that combination is different levels, right? We talked about different levels are going to apply to different levels of distraction or volumes required to communicate with your dog. Now, that being said, some dogs are going to find that vibrate is more aversive, meaning a bigger deterrent or more distracting, more aversive than stimulation. So you may want to start with vibrate if you have a bold, confident, mentally stable. And I say that not meaning in an offense, but it's the truth, okay? Brutally honest comment number 2. If your dog is struggling, like if they lose their mind with collar pressure, it falls into the category of mental stability, okay? That is the long and short of it. But you have a bold, confident, mentally stable dog that nothing phases them. Vibrate can be a really good thing to condition. It doesn't mean that you push vibrate, because I heard this literally this week. It was, my dog responds to vibrate in training sessions. Again, place and situationally oriented, but outside of training sessions, vibrate means nothing. Well, we don't have a good enough level of conditioning yet. we need to continue that conditioning standpoint.
And moving into the proofing category.
Correct. And then at the same time, we will move into a different volume. Vibrate on DT collars, which is what we use and recommend. The level doesn't change. There are a few collars on the market that I think they are vibrate only, though, and they would have different varying levels of vibrate. I think E-Collar Technologies is who makes a vibrate only collar, which I would not recommend, which is why we don't use them. But you have stimulation levels, and you can find a level that is the appropriate volume for the level of distraction, and then you can go back to vibrate, or you can move things around. It's all about finding the correct combination for the individual dogs. Some dogs work well with, yeah, that works great. Yep. Some dogs work well with that nick, or
pulse, like more of like a pulsing type of
correct
stimulation.
Yep. Some dogs freeze to continuous stimulation, like it's too big of a distraction. That's where that nick can come in. Otherwise, some dogs need the middle ground, like vibrate's not enough, but a continuous stimulation works, but nicking, it's enough of a gap that they can ignore it. So you can play around with that, and that's where we can help, okay? My recommendation for anybody on Patreon is that you set up the call with me to do your first collar conditioning session so that I can be there and direct you. Yes, that looks right. Do another rep. No, that's not right. We need to change this. We can make adjustments so that you're successful at that point. And then also, if you're struggling in the collar conditioning category, I can say, let's try this or this or this or this or this or this or this. All right, that's the ticket. That's what we need to do moving forward.
Well, I think that we have talked a lot about collar conditioning.
So how and when, and is there anything that we're missing from understanding a broad overview of collar conditioning and why?
I feel like we hit on most of it, explaining like how to adjust levels based on the level of distraction, how to condition first.
You need like 4 hours.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. And there are a lot of questions here that are going to be really interesting that I think is going to expound on that. So this is cool that Charles just pulled up. And I always like to tell people this because I feel like this is a highly undervalued and overlooked aspect of YouTube. It literally is a search engine, guys. It's like Google, except for videos.
It's owned by Google.
Okay, well, it's a video Google. And so you can search Standing Stone Kennels, collar conditioning, and literally, if you look at this, like, let's count the ways. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That one's not ours. So the first 7 videos that pop up are our videos on collar conditioning, whether it's place training, recall.
Standing Stone Kennels collar conditioning, but.
Well, yeah, but sometimes if you search just collar conditioning, some of our videos will show up too. But if you specifically are looking for videos that we have talked about collar conditioning.
And you are.
We are. Search it with Standing Stone Kennels and collar conditioning, and you will see a lot of the videos that we're talking about. Hey, look, there's our live right there as we're doing it.
Bingo, bango, baby.
But there was a super chat that was donated from Aaron to Nick, and there's been a couple additional comments from Nick kind of explaining things, and I think that this one is a very interesting conversation that we should hit on that I think will end up continuing to educate people. So Nick said, just got my first GSP. The breeder I got him from uses a check cord that goes behind his floating rib and doesn't use clickers at all. What do you think of that? Thank you. Cheers from Colorado Springs. So first of all, that is also a form of negative reinforcement, what you're doing. Negative reinforcement doesn't necessarily have to mean an e-collar. Negative reinforcement is any kind of stimuli applied to the situation that the dog finds as a mild annoyance that they want to shut off by complying with the behavior or complying with the cue.
Yep.
So,
or is positive punishment depending on how it's used, but it is, yes.
Yeah, so
100%.
Whether that's
the
e-collar, feeling that vibration buzzing on their collar or any stimulation on their collar, or just tug, tug, tug on their collar, or tug, tug, tug around their waist, or tap, 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 tap. Hey, do this until I stop doing that because that's annoying, right? Or a sound like an alarm clock for us, right? That is annoying and you want it to go away, so you're going to do whatever is being asked of you to make that go away. So what you're describing is negative reinforcement training, though you're not using an e-collar. I would say that you want to teach with positive reinforcement first.
It's scientifically proven to be the fastest, most effective. And I say fastest in the sense that not everything has to be fast. I heard a podcast recently where there was a discussion between dog trainers, and it was a big push about the word, well, this is the fastest way that I can work through this with my dogs. That description or descriptor was used, and then it was pushed back of, well, not everything has to be fast, okay? Well, efficiently working through the process is important. My time is important and valuable, and the time that you spend with your dog in the fun zone, I feel like is valuable. So if we can get through the beginning stages and build consistency and have an understanding and a quality level of the understanding of the process is there, faster, we can get to the fun stuff faster, and both of us can enjoy the process as being dog and owner.
And so, okay, so coming back to the next question as well, about his puppy's only 10 weeks old. So I don't recommend to people utilizing e-collars as a form of negative reinforcement training until their puppies are closer to 16 weeks old, if they have laid the groundwork, followed all the prerequisite steps of, oh yeah, charging the clicker, generalizing behaviors, differentiating cues. Then we're finally moving into that collar conditioning place, because that's typically when dogs are getting more distracted because they're bold and confident and becoming more independent. And that positive reinforcement isn't necessarily enough to keep and hold their attention in those higher distracting situations.
And Kat did an amazing job, put together our online course and laid this entire process out, even with to the extent of having sample weeks to look at, like what can I do throughout the week to kind of set up a training schedule. It's available courses, Standing Stone Kennels, standingstonesupply.com, either one. And it is on sale this week for 15% off. So definitely, if you're looking for a guide, that would be the place to go.
But so what I want to tell you, Nick, is what you're doing is putting the, check cord around their ribs and getting them tug to recall to you. That is truly a form of negative reinforcement training. If you can build that behavior via positive reinforcement training, clicker training is a great way, because that clicker not only it's the same every single time, and it marks the behavior that you're looking for. So it's a really clear form of communication to your dog, instead of using a verbal marker, like yes or good, which if Ethan is training the dog or I'm training the dog is going to sound completely different than a clicker. If he's using it or I'm using it, is the exact same.
Again, scientifically proven, up to 50% faster to use a clicker than to use any other form of marker, verbal marker, or which would pretty much just be the other option. So it's a verbal marker.
One time we had somebody that was using a mouth whistle. They were like, was their verbal marker.
So,
and I'm not trying to jest or make fun of them, but I was like, that
isn't hard to be consistent, and it's not timed properly. So
because it's much longer than a click. That's the exact moment that we're marking here.
The other thing e-collar related, okay, is we had this discussion a while back, probably a couple of years back, of what is the most important part of dog training, and it's timing. Okay, so, and then second to that would be consistency, right? So timing being the most important. If you need to time things properly, having this long leash is there. So the argument before was like, no, consistency is more important than timing. Well, if you are consistently doing the thing at the wrong time, you're not moving in the right direction. But even if you're not consistently doing it, but every time you do, you're timing it properly, you're at least moving in the right direction. So it's another benefit of having an e-collar.
And so this is something that I also want to mention about the use of positive reinforcement training and clicker training, and slowly conditioning that behavior through positive reinforcement before ever introducing any form of negative reinforcement, is not only does that teach your dog good work ethic, which is very important. A dog's learning to work for things, work for rewards, work for resources, whether that's attention or retrieves or food. But it's also building engagement and a very solid bond with the trainer. Dogs are going to be much more willing to work with you and enjoy working with you and look to work with you because they're like, hey, I'm going to get something out of this and it's going to be great and it's going to be fun and I'm going to enjoy it and it's going to be awesome. And there are a lot of dogs that end up coming in for training that if we don't do enough of that conditioning first, you can see some sourness try and come out in their training. And we will have dogs that come in for training, will move, they seem to really be catching on. They're older, they're more mature. And we're like, okay, let's move on. And it's like, oh, now they're like, oh, this training kind of stinks. This isn't as fun. So we go back to the basics and we rebuild engagement with positive reinforcement because the dogs enjoy those puppy parties. They enjoy that clicker training, those food rewards. So just because a dog's already been clicker trained or never been clicker trained doesn't mean you can't start now. And that is going to make them much more excited and willing to work for you. So I think skipping that step is going to hurt you in the long run. And your puppy's only 10 weeks old. So I would say you need to start getting a hold of that positive reinforcement training and rewarding them for those behaviors that you're asking of them. Instead of push, force. You're going to do this because I've got a check cord attached to you. This is something that bird launchers, this is a great example of utilizing proper timing, not forcing the dog to do the behavior because you've got a check cord attached to him. So there's different thought processes on how to get dogs to point their first birds. Some trainers utilize a check cord on the dog from the get-go, and that dog comes into the scent cone, and they hold them back and make them be steady on that bird. We don't do that. We utilize bird launchers, and we launch the bird to teach the dog to be more cautious the next time they approach. So I'm just showing like, hey, this is your choice to do this. Positive reinforcement. Hey, you're doing this because you want the reward of, hey, I did this right. I'm going to get this chase and this bird out of it instead of I'm forcing you to point this bird.
So a couple things to 100% you're right with this. A couple things that I want to point out here because it sounded a lot like we said, everything you're doing, Nick, is wrong. And that's not the case. I like the things that your trainer is also saying. We should do things slightly different. Okay, so the words that he said, I'm going to come back to this, but I want to draw a point to it. You are giving the dog 3 different ways for him to figure out what you're asking. Okay, so the rule of 3 applies all over the place in dog training, but we're going to come back to that because we recently got to work with some guys that had a similar thing. And Charles got to witness it firsthand, but it was an interesting conversation to have. The next is don't use an e-collar until he's about 80% trained. I agree with that. But we're going to utilize positive reinforcement to do that teaching versus kind of essentially just making them do it, which is kind of what it sounds like the recommendation is there. Like, for a prime example of another way would be, I'm going to push my dog into a sit position, and we're going to do that over and over and then start saying sit. Well, they will figure out how to sit on cue that way. But utilizing positive reinforcement and allowing the dog to
free shaping
or even luring and different pieces of that. But the dog is actually moving their own body is a huge part of them learning how to do it on their own properly. Because
doing it because they want to, not because they're made to do it.
Correct. And this ties back into your pointing aspect of things. If you are directly influencing them physically by holding them back on a pointed bird or pushing them into a sit, as 2 examples, you're also going to set yourself up for, in my opinion, of struggling for those things to happen without those physical cues, if you will, meaning dogs 150 yards away, but they don't feel the check cord anymore being pressure. Maybe I don't point this one because it sounds like fun to chase them. I enjoy that part of the game too. So when we develop dogs, they're actually doing it. It becomes their idea. It becomes more powerful. So now the rule of 3 category. So they were working on trying to point, or steadiness related things?
Steadiness, I believe.
It was kind of confusing what was going on there. I think there's some misunderstanding of the dog and where it was at and what the goals were. But what was their reasoning behind it? Did he explain reasoning behind the 3 points of contact, or?
Just basically that it was something that they had picked up at another trainer using 3. So he was using a check cord tug, an e-collar nick, and a verbal. But he was also mixing in positive. So the positive was good, like reassuring the dog what it was doing, but was also adding in purely negative reinforcements. It was all happening after the
fact. Or like
positive
punishment.
No, it was negative reinforcement.
Okay.
But it was 2 different kinds of negative reinforcement and then a purely a positive. So it was, it was at the end of when they were here. We talked very briefly about it.
It's interesting.
But also the dog wasn't quite where it needed to be, where they thought it was to do what they were doing. So it wasn't a good demonstration for what he was trying to show me. But they talked a few different times about using 3 different forms of communication at the same time, whether that be, and it's so very similar to that. So a physical, and then it sounds like he uses 2 verbals, a whistle and a verbal cue. So
sure.
Using the kind of the rules of 3 and using 3 different ways to communicate was
and
interesting.
And absolutely. So a lot of times when we teach a behavior like sit or recall even, so we're utilizing the cue of physical signal. So targeting, hey, come in and touch my hand here. And then that clicker is marking it and they're getting a food reward. So utilizing multiple forms of cues, so that not only that verbal cue, but also the nonverbal cue of either getting their attention up high for a sit, or, directing to sit, or directing them to a place, gesturing towards that, moving towards that with body language. Those are all things that are going to help your puppy understand what you're asking. But eventually we want to move to being able to get away from needing both and just being able to say sit without the sit, or kennel without moving towards the direction of the place. So that's just when you get to the point where you're able to offer the cue verbally only and your dog complies, that shows that your puppy has a very solid understanding of the behavior of the cue without needing all of those nonverbal assistances as well.
So, folks, we spent a lot of time talking about collar work, which is important, and then we spent a lot of time on one question. I want to try and grab some more for y'all and we'll scooch this one out another 15 minutes. And I do want to say, I've seen that here a couple times, I think from different people, that said, hit the like button and tell your friends and other dog owners. Folks, we appreciate that. It's not something I try and ask for very often.
That self-promotion thing is awkward.
Make sure and subscribe. It feels dumb to say it. It took me a very long time to even attempt to say it at all.
It feels uncomfortable, like the self-promotion side of things. Yeah.
We do appreciate y'all doing that. I mean, that's what drives what's going on. Now, I also do want to know, feel free to reach out to us. Did you find conversations, like deeper dive conversations like this, actually beneficial or not? So throw that at us. You've got emails or a contact form on the website or anything else.
And I also liked throwing out the poll prior to this live about topic suggestions coming straight from you guys, because we come up with things, but sometimes it would be nice.
Questions? You can poll in there. Well, I'm trying to scroll on. Sorry.
Yeah.
It would be nice to get more of your guys' direct input on what we're going to be talking about. I know Aaron had also asked the question about if we're going to be at Game Fair. I don't know word specifics, but we are going to be at Game Fair. We're going to be there both weekends, as long as, knock on wood, nothing crazy happens. When you're working with live animals, that kind of stuff can happen. But Ethan and I will both be up there. We're going to divide and conquer. One of us will be at DT Systems booth while one of us is with Eukanuba, and then we're going to flip-flop for the following weekend, and we'll be both doing seminars for Eukanuba.
Yeah, key thing to look there is at the Lakeside seminar area. As far as I know, that's where it will be. It's huge. To pay attention to the time frame on that, because it's a 1 hour seminar block that we get either in the morning or the afternoon, depending on the day. So,
and I don't really know what our blocks are yet. We'll make some announcements. We'll do some newsletter stuff.
We'll push
if you guys don't know, we have a newsletter. We've got like almost 12,000 people that subscribe. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Get it? Get the newsletter. And guess what? Those 12,000 people got to know about our sale before the sale was live. So little perks of that, as well as that's where things like upcoming events and announcements will happen. So talking about the Lone Stone Seminar and talking about the Game Fair stuff and Pheasant Fest and things like that we do, that comes out in the newsletter. And that's where you're going to get some of your best upcoming event information.
All right, let's get some quickies. We'll speed roll this here.
Oh, if you want a quickie, this isn't necessarily a quickie, but
I don't care.
When using the e-collar, this is from Bryce, by the way.
Sure.
When using the e-collar, when do we use the vibrate compared to stimulation? Also, when is it necessary? When, if necessary, is time to introduce the tone feature?
All right, so that is a great question. Tone is one that we didn't talk about. The DD700 actually has a tone function. It is one of two collars, the CC360, which is like a pet model. We don't talk about it often.
But that one only has tone. It does not have vibrate. So the DD700 is awesome because you can switch from vibrate to tone depending on, which works best for your puppy. And then also has the momentary and the continuous stimulation features.
The new hinting at units coming out with DT will have the ability to switch between tone and vibrate as well. So, now, when to use them is a key, and the quick answer on that is find what works best for your dog. Varying things are going to work at varying levels of communication. So
refer to the concert analogy.
That's 100% it. And that's where it's like the little nuances, if that's the proper way to use that, of knowing kind of how to finesse that process, depending on the individual dog and their response. That's where we can help you. So,
no bingos so far tonight either.
Oof, really?
Come
Let me look
on,
at
guys.
the little cards
we really
and see if
need
anyone's
the bingo
close.
so that we can. Oh, what's that one?
All right, Nan asks, can you give an example of a time you needed a higher level of stimulation?
That's a good one. So
typically goes hand in hand with the higher levels of distractions, the higher level of adrenaline and excitement.
Right?
Specifics, Bob.
So I would say on average, I'm going to give you 3 levels. Okay. So first and foremost, around the house in the yard with dog A. I don't even know an example. Let's go with, actually Nick's is a really good example. Okay. So around the house, you can use like a 1 or a 2 on Nick's. If you get to like a 3 to 5 category, this is 16 levels on a
H2O.
H2O 1820 DT's collar. That'd be one of the ones we use on a regular basis. Over a 3, you could potentially hear vocalization out of Nick's. And our goal is to not get to that point so that we're clear on that. It may happen on occasion. Different dogs are going to be more vocal than others. Thunder tends to be on the wimpier side and a little more vocal. But in the beginning aspect of things, okay, so around the house, Nick's specifically, 1, 2 category, he's perfect. You get him out in the field, actively working birds with steadiness or retrieve or any of those things category, and he's chasing something down, you may need 16, all of the collar, in order to get through to him. It's like he almost blacks out with prey drive. I'm completely tunnel visioned. I can feel nothing. I can hear nothing. I want nothing. And that's what I'm talking about, the e-collar being a very valuable tool. Now, people said, oh, what before e-collars, what did they do? They shot the dogs. And I don't mean shot and killed the dogs, but it was like the dogs running away.
Peppered them.
Yeah, it looks safe. Pepper the dog in the butt with 9-shot or rat shot or something to that effect where it's not going to kill the dog, but it's definitely going to get their attention. That's what we use the e-collar for today. Hey, focus, brah. We need you to come back this way. And then the last portion of this, and this would be a small amount that we're going to use this for, but we would use braking training. And I refer to it as braking. We don't use the term very often, but this is where it fits, like snake avoidance or snake braking, okay? I want dogs to be deathly afraid of following, tracking, interacting with a snake because that's going to potentially save their life. They get a little bored. Ooh, a snake. Let's go check that out. Now we're in the vet and their face is blown up. They may die. They need antivenom. That's really expensive. All of those things are bad. So in the terms of the hound guys, trash breaking or things that are not good for dogs to chase, that would be where we would use a lot of collar, and we would, in the form of breaking and a form of punishment, say, don't do that again. And outside of that, it's not really necessary. So
correct. Like all the collar to just like blow the dog's mind, basically. Like, hey, this was a terrible decision. Don't ever make it again. But every dog is so different, because Hex is a great example. That dog is pretty tough. So he naturally needs, just to get through to him, a little more collar than some of our other dogs that are on the quote unquote softer side. And that just has to do with sensitivity. What are they more sensitive to on the collar? And that can be from a distraction standpoint in the house. We've got little boys running around, lots of fun kid toys to try and grab, and he might need a little more stimulation to get him to go back to his dog bed and not just, vibrate. He's like, meh, I'm going to still go for the kids' toys. We have a new video coming out probably in the next week or so that we just shot with Glitch and his collar conditioning for duration video. I don't know exactly what it's going to be titled yet, but it'll be coming out, and it's about place training in our house and why it is so valuable. And that would be a really good one to watch if you guys are interested in the collar conditioning stuff, because it showed me playing with levels to figure out what he was going to comply to, what was going to redirect him, because he, in the video, counter surfed, grabbed kids' toys, all the things that I said, hey, this is why I want to collar condition this dog and proof the collar conditioning for place training with this dog, because it helps you work through counter surfing, jumping on guests, stealing kids' toys, chasing the other dogs, the kids around the house. And he exhibited two of the things that I was giving examples of in the video. And so you got to see me play around with levels and his reactions to those levels and him complying to those levels. So I think Nan was the one that had asked about different levels and how to choose those levels. That would be a good video to watch for you. Anything else, Charles?
One more? I think there's another good
one more. One more.
It's still, these are all very it's hard to go quick because they're very in-depth. Dyla asks, can you change a dog's mindset once they are collar smart, or once they figure it out, are they always going to know?
It's up to you. That falls on you 100%, because why do dogs get collar smart?
We talked about this at the beginning.
They get collar smart because you are not consistent enough with the use of the e-collar. So if you're willing to put in the time, you're willing to be 100% consistent, supervise your dog constantly while you have any expectations of them, yes, you can change their mindset. But the problem happens because we're all humans and human nature happens. You can't throw your dog out in the backyard without an e-collar and then call them in, and they ignore you, and you're like, well, next time I'm going to have to put the e-collar on you. No, you're going to have to follow through in those situations where you don't have the e-collar on them, and you ask them to come in. Chase them down, grab them, and say, nope, now it's time to come in. There is still a consequence for you not listening. That would be that positive punishment standpoint. It doesn't have to always come from an e-collar, guys. But the same should be said. If you're going to ask something of your dog, you're going to need to be able to reinforce it. And that usually revolves around utilizing an e-collar. Now, that doesn't mean you have to put the e-collar on your dog from sun up to sundown. But if you're going to be asking something of them, you know you're going to have them place training, and it's going to be in a very distracting situation. When you've got family or friends or kids running around, yeah, you should have your e-collar on them so you can hold them accountable with the e-collar. If you're going to throw them out in the backyard to go potty, and you know that they don't always want to listen and they'd rather stare at chi-chi birds and chase frogs and lizards and things, you should put your e-collar on them before you let them outside to go potty. Anticipate knowing when your dog is going to try and ignore you.
Absolutely.
We do it every single day in the kennel.
Yes.
Every single day. So that, and those dogs do not get collar smart because we don't overuse the cue, and we hold them accountable in the airing pen, in the let out pen.
I mean, that's the fact of the matter. Our job as professional trainers is easy, though, right? I mean, I explain this to people all the time. Oh, you're so good at this. Okay, well, if you spent all day doing it, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And the only time that I don't want to say the only time you interact with a dog to make that sound bad, but every time we interact with the dogs, we do it properly. And then it's not like, oh, I got home for work and I've got these distractions and these distractions. No, they are the primary focus, which is what we recommend that you do with your dogs. But that's unrealistic 100% of the time at home. So even our personal dogs, they get sloppy.
Our dogs.
Yeah.
At home. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just dump you out real quick because I need you to go to
the shoemaker's children have no shoes.
This was the time that there was a quail in the yard, and now the dog is in the whatever. So I even do this in preparation. We've been talking about hunt tests, and you've seen some of our stuff about that. My dogs that are hunt testing go to the kennel, and they don't come out until they're done with the testing event. And so that's so that we can maintain consistency, at least for
us.
Period.
To not be inconsistent when we do things like let them out of the house without e-collars or whatever.
Correct.
Because it's human nature, and it's not, I mean, it's even with your children, it's with everything in life. You can't be 100% consistent all the time. If you're trying to fix an issue, that's when that consistency is really important, whether that comes to creating a dog that's going to listen and not be collar smart. You have to be consistent if you want to make gains in the sense of building muscle. You got to be consistently hitting the gym, eating your macros. If you want to lose weight, the opposite, you have to be consistent to meet the goals that you have. So that goes for collar conditioning as well.
100%. We got one more great question here. Is the Canine Field Care Kit on sale, or our Med Kit, is it on sale this week? Yes, site-wide. If it's on the website, it's on sale, 15% off through Sunday. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm the guy with the pink gun.
I'm Kat, the dog trainer.
We've got Charlie in the back.
Woo!
We'll see y'all next week. We're going to be here next week.
Yes.